Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. And as I said on my Instagram post announcing this tutorial, there's a lot going on in this cake. I couldn't say no. I had so many things I wanted to try, and I threw them all in one cake. And just take from this what you can use for yourself. There's a lot. It could have been pared down, but this is where we are, and I'm going to explain everything to you. So we're going to make these sails first. These are rice paper sails. What I'm doing is adding some warm water with a few drops of, what's it called? It's a green color gel by Satin Ice. This is the olive color is what this is. And you're just going to soak your I always do that, rice paper in your water until it is softened. Now, your rice paper normally has that like waffle impression on it. And when it is saturated enough, that will be disappearing and it will become flexible. You can wait until the marks are completely gone, but I find that it's a little harder to handle at that point. It's almost too mushy. So I like to take it out right before that stage because it's going to still sit there and soak in the liquid that's already on the surface, and it will soften and those marks will dissipate. So I did 2 whole sheets and 2 sheets that I cut in half, and then 1 that I did in quarters because I wanted just a variety of sizes. And then I put them on my silicone mats. I'm just kind of manipulating them to get a little bit of motion in them. I did not have enough clips. I don't know where they all were. So I'm just kind of using bottles or anything that I have handy within reach there to kind of get the silicone mat to hold its shape. And those dried overnight. But we're going to skip to going ahead and putting the green on the cakes. These cakes are already filled and crumb coated. They are some Frankenstein cakes, some Franken cakes that I have used multiple times. Nobody's eating these, so they're basically just a foundation to put the buttercream on, a foundation to decorate. And I'm trying to think of what I used. I used forest green and black, I believe, to make this color. Now, one thing about this cake that did bother me was I did not like how the greens from the sails and the greens that I achieved on the rest of the cake did not, to me, quite match. But maybe that's just me being picky. It could be. So those are in the refrigerator chilling. And now I've taken my dried sails and I just heated up some oil, just some regular vegetable oil in a pan. And you can tell when the oil is ready when you stick a skewer, a wooden skewer, into the middle of it and bubbles form around the wooden skewer. What I'm basically doing is just frying the edges to get an extra texture on those. Again, a step I did not have to do, but I did want to show you that technique. But for the final look of the cake, I do think that it would have looked better without the fried edges. But you can use that in your own technique. Like if you did this design and you omitted a few things, then I think that would have made more sense. Continuing on, I did color my fondant the same color as the cake. I know in this angle with the lighting, it was a gloomy day that day. So it looks a little darker. It looks more black, but it really is a deep, deep green. And this silicone, mat that I'm using, the flower former there, the other one, well, actually both of them, I actually got on Temu, so I'm not sure if you can find those exact mats again. I will look and see if I can find them on Amazon. But you could find things that are similar because I'm just going basically for a Bas Releif. And I wanted it to be floral. So I used the sunflower mold. And you don't have to, just because a mold is to be a particular kind of flower, that doesn't mean that you have to do it in those colors. So I like the idea of I wanted green to kind of be the overarching color palette in this design. I didn't really add much else besides the white of the fondant coming up as a background color. So with these molds, you just want to dust them with cornstarch. And then manipulate your fondant into the crevices or whatever you want to call them. And then cut off any excess. I like to not put too much fondant into these molds. I like to kind of work with it. As you can see, I did that stem there. Use your fingers to manipulate it into the spots. And then there's way less to remove. But, never fails. There's always going to be some to remove. Very rarely do you have exactly the right amount of fondant in a mold that you don't have to remove any excess. Kind of like when you're doing a wrap around a cake. And how many times does that wrap just meet perfectly in the back? Maybe 1 out of 100. But we rejoice when it does happen. And then since there's cornstarch in these molds, and these are not a real deep molds, they're kind of whiter, they're really easy to remove. And I'm really hoping that I can find this exact mold for you guys. If not, I will link something very similar. Now I wanted the flowers to be on the bottom and on the top. So I made an extra one of the, that would be like when your petals have wilted off and flown away. This is what you're left with. It's kind of more of, I don't know what that would be called. Leave a comment in the comment section if you know what that's called. It's kind of the shell, the leftover part of the flower. This here is leftover fondant that I had from a previous project, which was part of the color inspiration. I already had it. So I just rolled it out and let it dry out, actually over the weekend. Overnight would be fine. It'd be a little bit softer on the inside, so you wouldn't have to go through this mutilating of the the fondant like I'm having to do there. I wanted smaller pieces. So since it was so dry, I just used this towel and a meat cleaver and broke it up. Then you get some varying sizes, and I set that to the side within reach, and then I just got some fresh white fondant. And this is one of the really neat things here. This was inspired by Angela Morrison on Instagram. I asked her permission to do this technique. I saw that she did it, and she said it was fine. So all you do is roll out your fondant and use some of your extra buttercream that you already had that you used on the cake. So this way you know that the colors work together. Remove the excess. You don't want it real thick. And then I just kind of folded it up and just kind of stretched it around, rolled it out, just manipulated it until I got it into a pattern that I liked. I'm kind of twisting it here and there, pinching it together. I didn't really necessarily want those just lines, so I added a little bit more. And then rolling it out and getting it again into a pattern that I liked. And that's a little thing I do there sometimes too. If it's all too uniform, I'll kind of cut a piece off and add it on. And then keep rolling it out again. Now the white of the fondant is basically disappeared because the buttercream has tinted it. But you still see the veins of the darker color. And I think this is really easy and really pretty to do. And then I just sprayed on a little water where I wanted to add those crumbled up fondant pieces, dried fondant pieces, put a little cornstarch on it so you can continue rolling it out without it sticking to your rolling pin or your smoother, as I was using there to kind of push those into the fondant. Just another added texture. That's one that I'm not regretting. I'm glad that I did that. And then I rolled them out or cut them into the size for each tier. The bottom one, I wanted it to wrap around. So I had measured, actually I rolled it out a little longer than I needed. So I do end up cutting it down. But I did set it aside, both pieces aside, to firm up before I attach them to the cake. That way they don't pull and stretch and lose their shape as bad. I could have left, as you can tell there, I could have left it to firm up a little bit longer. I did kind of have to wrestle it in place, but it still worked. You can just cut off the excess around the bottom there. I had some excess, and I just went back and cut it off. And then I did cut some little pieces out to give it a little bit more of a natural aged kind of look. And now I'm adding a stencil, another thing that I did not have to do. But this is an Angela Morrison stencil, and I wanted to use it. I really wanted to use it. So I used it on the top of each tier. Since you have the texture of the dried pieces in there, I did notice it worked, but I did have to go back in and clean out some of the pieces, some of the sections. It kind of wanted to sneak underneath because it's not a real smooth surface that I was working with. But I cleaned it out and just by using a smaller brush, and it worked fine. Since my cakes are chilled, the buttercream set right away, and I was able to pull out what I did not want. And then I just added some more of the fondant pieces. And I used a white color gel thinned out with some Everclear and a brush. And I kind of aged it a little bit on the darker pieces or the darker sections. And then I used this fan brush to edge out the edge. Now, I know she's a lot. She's a lot, this cake is. But I think it really is pretty. I think hindsight, I would take the stenciling off and I would have done the sails a little bit different of a color. But all in all, I think it turned out really pretty. And I hope there's some aspects of this that you can use. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something from it. And we'll catch you on the next one.